ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो धीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति सुपदान्तिकं मद्देहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं सहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणलिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी शुभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय श्रीमते रामनाथ स्वामी नाम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नाम नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी विशेष पाश्चात्य कम करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयति गिरिं वन्दे श्री गुरु नितारणं परमानंद माधवम श्री चैतन्येश्वरम हरि ओम। हरे कृष्णा। So all glories to the auspicious Parama Ekadashi Tithi. So again, by Krishna's wonderful arrangements, somehow we are able to discuss Hari Katha on very auspicious days. And in that way, the Lord is giving us the opportunity to create more good fortune for us, even though the planning wasn't done by us, just so happened. And not only is it Parama Ekadashi Tithi, but it's also auspicious, most auspicious month of Purushottama. That special month, which from the most unfortunate became the most fortunate by the special blessings of the Lord. That month, which was initially rejected as a contaminated month after having performed severe austerities and devotional service to please the Supreme Lord, received this very special blessing. So this shows that we can achieve all good fortune, no matter how ordinary, insignificant we are. If we take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because He is the most exalted, He is Varadaraj, can make our lives glorious, can increase our value. Prabhupada would often say, our life is like many zeros. So many things we may have all zeros. But if we add the one of Krishna in front of those zeros, then all those zeros have value. So if you have 3 zeros and you add 1, then it becomes 1,000. If you have 5 and you add 1, then it becomes 100,000, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so very auspicious. Also to remind you that the auspicious month of Purushottam Mass concludes on Wednesday. It's coming Wednesday. It's another few days. So if you have any special performances, Vrata, Dana, Tapasya, that you want to slip in before the offer expires, special offer of Purushottam Master. Have another today and another 3 days. So coming back to today's topic, Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishna Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishna Kam Karati Vacharam Bhagam Vedi Girim Yutpatam Hamante Shigum Vintaranam Paramanandavad Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. So we are moving on to chapter 22 of the fifth canto. We are discussing the Bhagavatam Cosmology series. And thanks to all of you for your liberal encouragement. Although I sometimes feel that I am boring all of you, it's much technicality. Somehow you are keeping coming back to the class. So I am thankful that and happy that you are deriving some value. I'm trying according to my capacity to make the topic relatable and understandable without making it too technical. I don't know whether I'm fully successful or not, but as I said, yeah, even if you do not understand everything, even if you do not remember everything, at least you get a broad idea of what is the picture that the Bhagavatam is painting. And you also have faith in the subject matter that is being presented. And this is a very, very important point. I remember when I came to Krishna consciousness, in the early years of Krishna consciousness, devotees would often, I have heard, not often, but a few times I've heard devotees saying that those who can cross over the mountain of the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavat, which is this cosmology section, to them the secrets of the Bhagavatam are revealed. I don't know whether any Acharya said this or not. So disclaimer. But the point is that sometimes certain sections, certain things are put in, of course, for multiple reasons. But some things also test our faith. Those who put too much faith in their senses and their own intelligence. It's not bad to have, of course, for our day-to-day workings and other things, we have to have faith in our senses and intelligence. That's at a very pragmatic day-to-day level. But when it talks about, when we are talking about the subject matter of ultimate reality, the true nature of creation, and especially about learning about things which are beyond the reach of our senses and our intelligence. It is very important for us to accept this limitation if we want to actually make progress towards true knowledge. Prabhupada would often quote the Kupa Manduka Nyaya, the ancient philosophy of Nyaya, logic. There's something known as a Kupa Manduka. Kupa means well, Manduka means frog. This is Sanskrit term. Kupa Manduka Nyaya. The frog in the well syndrome. What does that mean? That the frog who has only seen his well all his life thinks that that is all that is there in all existence. Because that's all. He has a well and he has a small space. That is his universe. That is what he can see. That is what he can perceive. That's the limit of his experience. So he practically is unable to imagine or accept anything more than that. Once a frog, Prabhupada says, from the Atlantic Ocean, Prabhupada explains it like this, came to meet this frog in the well, and he told him, I came from the Atlantic Ocean. So Atlantic Ocean? What is it? Is it like my well? So it is much bigger than your well. Oh, is it twice of my well? No, it is much bigger than that. Is it 5 times my well? And he went on and on and on, 5 times, 10 times. And as he was speaking like this, he was inflating his body and making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, how can you compare a well to the Atlantic Ocean? So this frog couldn't, his imagination and intelligence couldn't conceive of what this other frog was seeing because his experience was much higher and far beyond the experience and imagination of the Kupa Manduka until the point that he bloated himself so much that he burst and died. So one of the things Prabhupada emphasizes is that we as seekers of the absolute truth recognize our limitations. What are those limitations? The Vedas say that we as human beings have 4 limitations. We have imperfect senses, we are illusioned, commit mistakes, and we have a tendency to cheat. And that is why perfect knowledge for us is best accepted from a perfect authority who has a reach far beyond us and who is free from these 4 defects. And ultimately that refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the words from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shabda Brahma, in the form of divine revelation, form of Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas, and so many other scriptures. Because this knowledge is not just of human origin. It is apaurushaya. It is coming from the transcendental platform. It is free from these defects. The creator of the world has given his model of creation, and which has been validated and realized by many, many great personalities. Narad Muni travels all over the universe, right? Is he not familiar with the universal structure? He was sitting in this Bhagavatam class where Shukdev Goswami was explaining the structure. So he has also vetted it. Otherwise, he would have said, Shukdev Goswami, sorry, you are saying something incorrect. I have been there. This is not like this. But Narad Muni did not interrupt Shukdev Goswami explaining to Parikshit Maharaj. And so many other great sages from all over the Sapta Rishis came. Remember, we are talking about the Saptarishi Loka, which is just below Dhruva Loka. They came. They were sitting for the Bhagavatam. So it is important to have faith in the right sources. We are not talking about blind faith. We are not talking about just somebody comes and has a long beard and a turban and says that I am great and I have realized everything and take divine knowledge from me and just foolishly believe anybody who seems to speak in a very charismatic way that they know the truth. No, we're not talking about that kind of naive submission and being gullible. We're talking about accepting a source which has been referred to for eons. And that subject matter which has been vetted and realized firsthand since thousands of years by great, great sages across time, across regions. So only when we approach the Shastra with this kind of faith, then the Shastra opens itself to us. And I have spoken this many times, that even when we are trying to understand Scripture, Scripture is also a personality. Scripture conceals its knowledge from the unfaithful. That's why Krishna tells it towards the end of the Bhagavad Gita. Na abhaktaya, na atapaskaya. Don't give this knowledge to those who are not devotees, those who are not faithful. This knowledge is not meant for them. Why? Because they will simply misinterpret and create a chaos in society when you try to explain these things. Or they will try to disturb the faith of the faithful. of those who are faithful, but their faith is weak. Those who are strongly faithful, of course, their faith will not be disturbed by the blasphemous, unfaithful people. So the Bhagavatam is describing a model of the universe which is more than what the eyes can see, more than what the telescope can gaze into. But how do we know this is true? We can to some extent validate it, that it must be true, because what modern science has found in terms of interplanetary distances, distance between the earth and the moon, distance between the earth and the sun, the diameter of the earth, the diameter of the moon, the diameter of the sun, all these are accurately recorded in the Srimad Bhagavat since thousands of years. And the Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago, but the knowledge has been much earlier than that. How could they have ever figured this out? Unless they had a source which is far beyond what we can imagine. The Hindus, the Sanatanis, they have been accurately calculating planetary motions for thousands and thousands of years with perfect panchanga, predicting eclipses, predicting the motions of planets, including the retrograde motion, when which planet will be in which sign, to the dot. So that means they had a very, very solid understanding. So from validating some of the aspects which we can validate with modern science and comparing them with this model, we can develop faith that there must be some aspects which modern science is unable to validate, but that I am accepting on faith because these people know what they're talking about. They're not simply telling, the kind of stories. Oh, my voice is breaking. Is everyone experiencing that?
No, Prabhu, we are able to hear it properly.
Okay.
So voice is breaking, Prabhuji, can't hear.
No,
it's
little
low,
bit.
actually.
No, Prabhu. No, your voice is not breaking.
It's okay. Here I can hear it loud and clear.
I can hear loud and
clearly.
Okay, fine. Okay. So at least from my side, the sound is getting broadcasted. So, okay. So somewhere in the network, somewhere there's a problem. Okay. So, yeah. So maybe you want to just check on your side the network connectivity if possible. So the point is that we are not having blind faith in scripture, but we are having faith which is reasonable. So anyway, so it is very important. And when we approach scriptures with this kind of a transcendental faith, then eventually the scriptures reveal the secret that they have to offer in our hearts. And those who are serious students of the scriptures, the Gita, the Bhagavatam, they have this experience that a particular point in their own studies, they will suddenly see that the scripture is opened. So even though earlier they were reading, the scripture was closed. In the sense, the knowledge was not manifesting. But a particular time will come when it will appear as if the scripture is talking to you. The verses are, I'm just animating this. It's not that verses are flying. So the point is that that which is inaccessible, when you put the right password, it becomes accessible easily. So that is the question. So faith is very important. So when we listen, the Bhagavatam emphasizes attentively and with faith and respect. It doesn't happen immediately, but over time when we do this, the Lord and the scriptures are kind enough to allow us to understand. And the more we develop and the more when we cross some of these milestones, then deeper and deeper knowledge becomes revealed. Yasya deve parabhakti yatha deve tatha guru tasyaite kathite hi artha prakashante hi mahatmanah. He who has implicit faith in Guru, and similarly, just like in Guru, just like in the Lord, similarly in the Guru, yatha deve tatha guru tasyaite kathite hi artha prakashante hi mahatmanah. All the deeper secrets of the scriptures become revealed in their heart. So even as they study scripture, what the scripture is saying, the inner purport automatically awakens and is understood. So within scriptures also, the scriptures are designed that there are tests of faith. So why I'm explaining all these things is, fifth canto is such a test. That's why in this context I'm explaining. And it is not wrong to ask question. Faith doesn't mean that you have to try to prove how like this, how like that. We can ask all sides of questions, but we have to understand that some things we will not be able to validate with our mind and senses. That we must accept that we have a limitation in terms of validation in our current status. When you become like Narad Muni, then you don't need to depend on that. But until that time, or if some of us are born in a Bhauma Swarga somewhere else, or go to Chandra Loka, Surya Loka, somewhere else, and we get a first-hand experience. Of course, there is no need. So then we'll realize, oh yes, when I was on earth, I had read in the Bhagavad, I had attended this class on Zoom, where all this was described. Now I'm actually seeing it. So anyway, we are moving on to chapter 22. This is a small chapter, a very small chapter, and that's why I'm giving such a long introduction. It's only 17 shlokas. Of course, I'm not just speaking things which are unimportant. What I just spoke is actually very, very important. Because if we do not approach this knowledge like this, it will remain information to us. So we should always be very prayerful to the Lord and to the transcendental message, that the message will enter our heart and illumine. And that is what the Gayatri prayer is also about, isn't it? May the sun, who's the representative of Surya Narayana, illumine my intelligence. Both materially and spiritually. So in our last class, in the 21st chapter, we discussed about the orbit of the sun. So this chapter is entitled The Orbit of the Planets. So sun is considered one of the grahas. Again, I explained this in detail in the last class. The term graha and the term planet is slightly different. So don't get disturbed suddenly. Oh, the sun is a star and it's not a planet. The term graha has a very specific meaning in Vedic astronomy and Vedic astrology. So I'll just use the term graha so as to not disturb anybody's geography or astronomy understanding. So we discussed about the orbit of Surya, and now today we are going to discuss the orbit of the other grahas. Which are the other grahas? Moon, upward, going upward. Moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu come down. They are also grahas. They are lower than the sun. The others are upper. So if you add all of them together, it comes to 9. That's why we have the famous Navagrahas. These are the Navagrahas based on our karma. are dispensing that karma to us in various ways. How exactly that works, I do not know. But it's not necessary for us to know. These are all subtle systems. Karmana adaiva netrena. By the arrangement of the Supreme Lord through his time energy dispensed through the various governing agents of karma like the grahas, the reactions to our karma is good. And that's why
Prabhuji, sorry to interrupt. Is your voice breaking? Because I'm not able to hear. So is it same for everyone?
It was bad for me also, but now it is okay.
We can hear. We can hear.
Yeah, we can. I can hear.
So if some people are able to hear, then it cannot be an issue on my side.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear now, Prabhu. Yeah, something dropped in between.
Okay. So, so these grahas are important. That is why at the time of birth, we prepare the Janma Kundali that represents the position of all these planets overall on the Kala Chakra. And we'll be discussing the concept of Kala Chakra briefly today. And in the next class, we'll discuss a bit more detail because all these planets are moving vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time. Remember when the Mahabharata serial would begin, the Hindi Mahabharata of B.R. Chopra, he would show the wheel. Main Kal hu, I am time. So that idea of a wheel has come from somewhere. So what is that wheel of time? We'll also discuss today. There is actually something called Kala Chakra. So we'll discuss that today also and how it is associated and connected with the rotation. Main samay hu, Amit is telling me. Okay, yeah. So that concept also we'll discuss. So today's chapter is actually quite small in its length, but it is also a very interesting topic. It's an extension of what we have already discussed. Some of these aspects we have briefly discussed earlier. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and I'll just quickly start with. Okay. So can you see my screen? Yeah. So this was a topic we already discussed in the last class. We discussed about how there is a Bhumandal. The Bhumandal is actually terraced. It is shown flat downwards, but actually it is a terraced one with the 7 concentric, oceans and islands. And in the middle of Pushkara Dvipa, there is the Manasottara mountain. The Surya in his chariot floats on a wind on top of the Manasottara mountain and makes his way around the orbit known as Samvatsara. It goes round and round and round. And his movement, he's on a chariot, and we discussed about the chariot in great detail, so I'm not going to go into that again. Quite a huge chariot. Very, very huge chariot with Aruna as the charioteer. And it is said to be, his chariot is said to be compared to a bull who is pulling an oil-making machine. So there are 2 axles here. So we discussed all this topic in detail. One of the central points which I wanted to re-emphasize here is that the pivot around which the Surya Dev is revolving, rotating, is actually Dhruva. This Dhruva Meru axis is practically the central axis. Surya's orbit is said to be in the center of the universe, if you remember. Yes? Even though Surya, his chariot is around 1 lakh yojanas, 0.1 million yojanas above the Manasottara mountain. This axis, which is the orbit of the sun, is said to be in the middle of the universe, which coincides roughly with the base of Mount Sumeru. And this axis is the central axis of the universe. And Dhruva is said to be, while on the lower side, Mount Meru is like an immovable lower part of the axis. In the sky upwards, Dhruva Tara is the other part, which is the immovable point in the heavenly regions, which is not just an imaginary pivot, but the pivot which actually is holding and tying all the planets and causing them to revolve around it. This is one thing that humankind has known for generations, that they always see that hey, this one Dhruva is always fixed in the sky, vis-a-vis the earth. Huh? All other things seems to be moving. But this guy, whoever this guy is, shining up there bright, the star, this Dhruva Tara, whole star is always in that one fixed position. Why is it like that? Because Dhruva is fixed and earth is fixed. So when we look up, always Dhruva is in the same position. All other planets and stars have an orbit. And their orbit is always vis-a-vis this axis between Mount Sumeru and Dhruva. Dhruva is the main pivot. Okay, so that's the broad picture. We discussed also briefly about the moon. We had just started this topic, and this is the beginning of this particular chapter. The moon, the Bhagavatam says, actually, before I go to the moon, I want to just briefly explain the concept of Kala Chakra. I think that will be interesting because the Bhagavatam also explains like that. So let me go into that, and then I will come back to the sun and the moon. So the Bhagavatam explains that sun is moving around in a clockwise manner around Mount Sumeru and this Dhruva axis. This whole chapter begins with Shukadev Goswami asking Parikshit Maharaj that, once you said it is moving, keeping the Mount Sumeru on the right and moving clockwise, then at one point you mentioned that Surya is going around, keeping Sumeru on the left. So I'm confused. What is the correct understanding? Is he clockwise or is he anti-clockwise? So Shukadev Goswami clarifies the subject matter by introducing the concept of Kala Chakra. So I'm going to explain the same way that he explained. So he says, yes, it is true that based on what I've explained earlier, it is actually a clockwise movement of the sun. And that is why for the earth, which is located at the southern tip of Jambudvip, the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and it keeps moving like this. And that is day and night. But there is something which is known as the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time for the universe. This wheel of time is made up of the Zodiac. Zodiac. Yes, you can see the Zodiac. The Kala Chakra is made up of the Zodiac. There are certain stars, certain constellations. Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, which in the Vedic language are also known as other Sanskrit names, Vrishchika, Tula, Kanya, Simha, Karka, Mithun, Vrishabha. All these Rashis, zodiac signs, together form a wheel-like figure. And that wheel-like figure rotates around the axis of Dhruva and Sumeru, also in a circular fashion. And this rotation of this zodiac is known as the Kala Chakra. This is how it looks like in the sky. Each of these zodiac is actually a combination of multiple stars. And when those stars, their stars are in such a way that when a line is drawn to them, they represent a particular kind of entity. For example, Karka Rashi, the stars can be joined in a way that they represent a crab. For Aries, they represent a ram. Taurus, they represent a bull, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to go into those details. But they represent, when they are drawn, they represent something like this wheel. All of these stars are uniformly distributed. Actually, all these constellations, these 12 constellations are uniformly distributed around this wheel. And as you can see, actually, this wheel is not exactly horizontal. Can you see that there is an incline? This wheel is a wheel of time. Even though I'm not going to go into the details of the incline, there's a specific angle that it is inclined at and is moving at a particular. And based on that, a lot of astronomical and astrological calculations are done. But I'm not going to go into that because we don't want to make this class too technical. But just so that you are aware that this wheel is not entirely horizontal. But this wheel is continuously rotating at a steady pace. What is the pace of the rotation of this Kala Chakra? Because this chakra of Kala, now the Bhagavatam says that actually it is not that these constellations are the Kala Chakra. The Kala Chakra or the wheel of time is the wheel of time which is run by which is controlled and put into motion by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But these constellations are resting on it, and that's why they are moving accordingly at the speed of the Kala Chakra. We'll go a bit more into the detail of this topic a little later. I don't want to go into that dimension because there's a dimension of the nakshatras also in this, but I don't want to go into that now. I'll go into that topic a little later, and then we'll again go back to the big picture as we conclude this particular chapter. So this Kala Chakra, again coming back to the simple diagram, is rotating continuously at a speed which is almost same as the speed of the sun. As the sun is rotating around Mount Sumeru. Only that the Kala Chakra is slightly faster than the sun. Okay. Now, you have to stretch your imagination a bit. The Bhagavatam gives an example. Assume this is a potter's wheel. Kumbhar. Kumbhar ka jo wheel hota hai na? The potter. Imagine this is a potter's wheel and this is rotating. And imagine there is a small ant here on this potter's wheel. This wheel is rotating round, 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 round. And there's a small ant. And the ant is moving in the direction which is slightly opposite to the direction of the rotating wheel. Then, even though the ant is moving with the wheel at one level, the ant also has a motion respective to the wheel. Even though it is moving around this axis in a circular fashion, vis-a-vis this wheel, the ant is also moving backwards. So with this example, the Bhagavatam says, in a similar manner, because the sun is slightly slower than the Kala Chakra, and the Kala Chakra is faster, it seems as if the sun is moving in a direction which is slowly but opposite the direction of the Kala Chakra, vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra. Are you with me so far? I hope you can imagine. If the sun was fixed to the Kala Chakra and went at the same speed, it would move exactly along with the Kala Chakra. Because the sun is slow, when the Kala Chakra moves here, the sun is slightly left behind. Moves for the slightly further left behind. It's still progressing forward, but it is left behind vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra. That's why relative to the Kala Chakra, the Surya seems to be moving not forward into the Rashis, but backward into the Rashis. And that's why the planets all move backward through the Rashis, not forward through the Rashis. Always note this. Why? Because Kala Chakra moves faster, which means the speed at which the constellations Chakra moves in space, which represents the Kala Chakra, Surya is not able to keep up with it. It moves slightly by design. Not that Surya is not powerful enough to, but by design it is like that. And that is why the Surya appears to move. If we assume the Kala Chakra stationary, then Surya appears to be moving like this. And that is why Surya's motion is sometimes described as counterclockwise vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra. And then that motion, Sumeru, happens to be on its left. So actually there is no contradiction, it's just a different perspective. Okay, I hope you are with me so far. But as far as we on earth are concerned, with respect to us, yes, fast clockwise motion. How fast? One circle in one day for Surya. And the Kala Chakra is slightly faster than that. Okay, so you're with me so far. Now, another aspect of Surya is discussed. We'll discuss that before we come to Chandra and then the other planets. The sun god, who's actually a representation of Lord Narayana, he said many sages offered beautiful prayers to Lord Narayana. And it is a Lord Narayana whose Kala Chakra, because time is Krishna, isn't it? The Supreme Lord. And the time energy is an energy of the Lord. Kalosmi. Recently in the famous movie Oppenheimer, also Oppenheimer says that statement, Kalosmi. So I am time, the energy of time, who's the destroyer of all. So that powerful energy, and time is not always a destroyer, of course it's also a destroyer, but time is the agent of change. And destruction is of course one dimension of change. Creation is one dimension, maintenance is one dimension, and destruction is another dimension. It is said that Lord Narayana, in the form of this Kala Chakra or time, divides himself into 12 parts. And these 12 parts are almost like 12 months. This is Kala Chakra. And these 12 parts are the 12 months, and these 12 parts, two parts, when they are joined, each of the two parts forms one season. So the rim of this chakra can be divided into 6 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are total 6 seasons of 2 months each. And the weather and other physical features, according to these seasons, change in various parts of the world. Why does the Lord do like that? Because he wants, according to the situation of the particular seasons, that human beings be encouraged to do certain kinds of activities and follow certain kinds of prohibitions so that they can purify their activities and make spiritual progress. So those who follow this system of Varnashram, prescribed duties as given by Lord Narayana and as set up and governed by the Lord under the purview of the Kala Chakra, and who worship the Supreme Lord through this process, they can actually attain liberation if they follow the process with faith. So basis this concept, the year the Samvatsara is also divided into 12 months. Chaitra, Vaishak, Ashad, Jeshta. And each of this month can be mapped to how the sun passes to the various signs of zodiac. Let me see if this one shows it better. Okay, this one shows it better, but it is too small. I don't know whether you can read it. But these are the typical dates in which the sun passes through certain rashis and does its transits. And, what are the corresponding months of the year? So this is months. So these are the constellations. And these are the months. Now the months are shown in 3 lines. The reason they are shown in 3 lines is the cycle of the months repeats every 3 years because there is a Purushottam Mass, this extra Mass. So anyway, I don't want to go into too much technicality, otherwise I'll just confuse all of you. But the concept that I'm trying to explain here is that as the Kala Chakra is moving and as the sun passes through the various constellations, various months, various seasons all take place. That is essentially the point that we are trying to highlight. So each month, there are 12 months, 12 constellations. Each month that the sun passes through one constellation, sun takes one passes through one constellation because moving in the reverse direction of the Kala Chakra. Takes 1 year to go through all the 12 constellations, which means it takes 1 month to go through one constellation, and that 1 month is not 30 days. That 1 month is 1 lunar month or 2 fortnights. Which is roughly 28 days. Also noteworthy, since we are on this picture, we may not revisit this picture again, I will briefly mention. Just like the constellations are pinned on the Kala Chakra, which means they are very much integral and move along with the Kala Chakra, so are all the nakshatras fixed on the Kala Chakra. How many nakshatras are there? Anybody knows?
28, Prabhuji.
28.
28.
28. I thought there are 27.
27.
27 or 28?
27.
27, right?
28, Prabhuji.
Okay. Anyway, we will reconfirm that later. Or you can just even count from here. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27, right? We started here, right? Yeah. So anyway, it doesn't matter. We are not, yeah. So my understanding is 27 constellations, but if there is a debate on this, I can recheck this. But it is said these constellations are also pinned on the Kala Chakra, and roughly each zodiac sign is roughly 2.25 constellations. So the constellations and zodiac signs, have this kind of an association as is shown here. So a lot of things come out from this picture. I don't want to go into all those details. I am myself not thoroughly conversant with all those calculations. But key point for you to remember is there's a Kala Chakra On the Kala Chakra, there are the 12 constellations and the 27 nakshatras, and they are all moving round on Kala Chakra. And the sun is moving in the counterclockwise on this Kala Chakra as it is moving on the top of Manasottara mountain. And it is passing through this zodiac. As it is passing through the zodiac, it is also passing through various nakshatras. And as it is passing through the various zodiacs, it is also creating various kinds of months, seasons, etc., etc., etc. So again, 6 months in the northern hemisphere, 6 months in the southern hemisphere. We discussed this point also, that how as the sun is actually moving circular, Dhruva pulls the sun upwards and the sun's orbit, the sun's plane of orbiting goes upwards and closer to Dhruva in an angle, goes upward and closer to Dhruva. So it becomes, the radius becomes smaller and the speed becomes slower as it gets closer to Dhruva. Then that is Uttarayan, and as it comes back lower, it comes into Dakshinayan. So, there are diagrams and pictures for that. I don't intend to go into that. So I've deliberately excluded that. You can read the Vedic Cosmology book if you want to read more on that, because that will become a very technical discussion and that requires a fair bit of imagination. But like what I had explained in the last time, the sun rotates, and it rotates, as it rotates, it goes slightly upwards and its orbit becomes smaller in radius and circumference, and again it goes down and the orbit again becomes bigger. So that kind of motion up, down, as it is rotating is continuously happening as Uttarayan and Dakshinayan alternately come. So this is about the sun. Now, if you remember, we are still talking about the sun. The sun, this is Dhruva. And now we are going to discuss all these planets in the middle. Please remember, these are the nakshatras, 28. Okay, 28. So you win. Not 27, 28, it says here. Yeah. So 28 nakshatras. So these nakshatras are also, as we just mentioned, they are attached to the Kal Chakra. The constellations, the zodiac is not shown here. The zodiac stars are also there. And they are all tagged onto the Kala Chakra. The sun has its orbit, which is around roughly the base of the Mount Sumeru. We also briefly discussed about the orbit of the moon. We are not going to go into that again too much in detail now, but I'll briefly mention that the orbit of the moon is 1 lakh yojanas above the orbit of the sun. The orbit of the sun was 1 lakh yojanas above the Manasottara mountain. So 0.1 million yojanas and 0.1 million yojanas. The sun takes 1 day to go around. The moon has its own orbit. The moon's orbit has a different duration and period. In fact, it is said that the moon also, just like sun is going around Mount Sumeru, the moon is also going around Mount Sumeru. The axis is the same. It is the Dhruva Sumeru axis. It's the same axis for all the planets. But the moon moves around faster, almost 13 times faster. So in practically 1 month, the moon has already gone around. So there is a difference in, how the sun moves and the moon moves. It is said, I'll just read some statistics. The moon creates day for the Devatas during its waxing period and creates day for the Pitris during its waning period. So we discussed that, the moon has two parts to it. There is the part, half of it, which is an abode for the Pitris. And there is another half of it, which is abode for the Devatas. Now, the interesting thing about the moon is that the moon is always, only one side of the moon is facing the earth. It's very interesting. Now, as the moon moves around, it's moving actually around Mount Sumeru, but because Earth is also located at a particular point, you will see the moon also seemingly moving around the Earth in its own orbit. And as it moves around its own fortnight, it is said half the fortnight, which is one paksha, half the month, which is one paksha, is day for the Pitris and night for the Devatas. And the other paksha is exactly the opposite. So if you can imagine this, well and good. If you cannot imagine, no problem. Just understand the point that the moon's day and night, daytime on the moon on a particular part of the moon is 14 days and night is 14 days. So our one lunar month is one lunar day. That's all you need to remember. Even if you cannot imagine the geographical movement. Okay, that's the key point. And the moon is also rotating around. It is said that the moon moves very fast. In fact, it is said within 30 muhurtas, which is one day, the moon passes through one constellation. So the moon's movement is, much faster than the Earth. So the moon is very special. Just like the sun is the cause of life, the moon is also the cause of life. In fact, the moon nourishes all life. And that's why the moon has various wonderful names. It's also known as Manomaya, because the moon is the predominating deity of the mind. The moon is also known as Annamaya, because the moon is the one who nourishes the plants and the herbs and gives us food. He's known as Amritamaya because he's the source of life. He's also known as Sarvamaya because he's seen to all living entities, humans, animals, devatas, pitris, everyone. Now, coming back. Sorry, we are at 10 p.m., but I have only 7 more verses and I need only 7 more minutes. We'll complete the chapter. Because the rest is very simple description of the rest of the planets. The Bhagavatam doesn't go into too much detail in this chapter of the planets and the conditions of the planets, because the focus of this chapter is simply on the orbits. So the Bhagavatam describes this as follows. He says, above the moon are the 28 nakshatras, which are situated around 3 lakh yojanas above the moon. And these are, of course, as we discussed, the 28 nakshatras, which are pinned to the Kala Chakra. They all move in a clockwise fashion, similar to all the other planetary movements. Actually, all these planets are moving clockwise around Sumeru. Which are the exceptions? Any exceptions?
Is it Rahu Ketu, Prabhuji?
Yes, the notorious duo. So the demons always like to do exactly opposite of what the devatas like to do. So you're right. Yeah, all others are moving clockwise except Rahu and Ketu. The next planet is Venus, Shukra, who is again 2 lakh yojanas above the zone of the nakshatras, is also moving clockwise around the axis through a Sumeru axis. Shukra, who is also known as Ushana, is considered generally a favorable planet. It's actually also quite fast like the sun, but sometimes its motion is said to be, it is ahead of the sun, sometimes it falls behind the sun. Generally, it is considered a favorable planet. It generally is responsible for causing rain on Earth, and it also nullifies the influence of planets which may cause a impediment to rainfall. This is interesting information. So Venus also has an association with rain. The next planet, which is Mercury, Buddha, is considered auspicious. It is above another 2 lakh yojanas above the orbit of Venus. By the way, Buddha is the son of Moon. Moon, god who's Soma, Buddha is his son. So Buddha, its movement is also considered generally similar to the sun. Generally, Buddha is considered an auspicious planet, but when it doesn't move along with the sun, which means it moves in a retrograde fashion, it produces a fearful situation and causes drought, cyclones, and cloudy weather. So this is what the Bhagavatam describes. So I'm just briefly mentioning. So generally, Buddha is auspicious, but in certain conditions, when it doesn't move along with the sun, it can have a negative influence. The next planet, Mars, which is another 200,000 yojanas above Buddha, is said to be generally an inauspicious planet. Angaraka. Sometimes also it becomes retrograde, but when it is not retrograde, when it is in its normal motion, every 3 fortnights, it passes through one sign of Zodiac. Generally, Mangal is considered inauspicious and it hints at grief. The next planet above, which is another 200,000 yojanas above, is Brihaspati, Jupiter. Jupiter is generally an auspicious planet, especially auspicious for the Brahmanas. It moves through the zodiac at the rate of one sign, 1 year. Now, those who are conversant with Vedic astrology would know all of these calculations already. So, once Jupiter enters a sun sign, a zodiac, it remains in that sign for 1 year. The next planet, another 200,000 yojanas above Jupiter, is Shani, Saturn. Saturn travels slowly through the zodiac. It takes 30 months or 2.5 years for Shani to travel through one sign. That's why we say the Dhaya of Shani. In Hindi, Dhaya means Dhai Sal, 2.5 years, 30 months. Travels through one sign. And when your really bad time comes, there is a Sade Sati of Shani, which means 7.5 years. So 2.5 plus 2.5 plus 2.5. So these are all astrological calculations. Shani's main role, Shani is generally inauspicious because he gives us the punishment for our bad karmas. That is one of the prominent roles of Shani. So that doesn't mean Shani is bad. He's just giving you what you deserve or giving us what we deserve. So these are all just delivering us what we have created for ourselves. But obviously, we never like the bringer of bad news or the giver of bad news. So generally, we consider him inauspicious, and Shani is generally considered very troublesome for all people. Above Shani are the Saptarishis, which are 1.1 million yojanas above Shani. These are the planet of the 7 sages, and they are also rotating around. These 7 sages are always thinking of the well-being of all living entities. And they are actually circumambulating Dhruvalok. And obviously, Dhruvalok is the main pivot. Dhruvalok is the place where the Supreme Lord is residing on Shvetadvip, being worshipped by the great devotee Dhruva. So this is the vertical design of the universe. Each of these planets has its own speed, has its own orbit. This is a very simplified picture. There's one thing we have actually come to the conclusion of the chapter. We've already discussed the 17 verses. I'm just going to wrap up in 2 more minutes. Please bear with me. All of these planets are rotating around, whether it is Surya, Chandra, all these nakshatras, they're all rotating around this axis. It is said in the Bhagavad and other scriptures that actually all of these planets keep Dhruva as the pivot, just as a bull who's tied by a rope to an axle point, to an axis, so rotates around that pivot. Similarly, all these planets are rotating. Actually, there is a rope, a very thin, subtle rope of wind. Which ties each of these celestial objects to Dhruvaloka. And Dhruvaloka ties and it rotates these objects around this axis. Oh, not this one. You can see this. Have you seen a merry-go-round? See all those small seats. There is a something tying from the top. Then it is rotating, and all because of the string tied, everything is rotating around central axis of the merry-go-round. So this is Dhruvaloka. These are all the various celestial objects and stars and grahas, nakshatras, constellations. Everything is moving around. This whole circle is rotating at different speeds. Different planets, stars are rotating, and Kala Chakra is rotating at a fixed speed. This is just to give you that idea. This whole thread which is holding all these planets is called by a name which is known as Vata Rashmi. Vata Rashmi means it is a rope made of the wind. So they're all rotating like this. So this is how the Bhagavatam describes, and I'm just with one last picture I have all. So this is kind of the summary. So I'm going to conclude with this. So I'll go through all the pictures one by one. So this is our ocean, this is our universe. Just look at this part for now. Half of it Garbhodok ocean. This is the Loka mountain. This is the full Bhumandal. This again, this is a simplified view. Actually, it is, incline, but this is a simplified view. Then this is the axis. The Meru is here. And then there is Dhruvaloka here. The height of the Dhruvaloka is almost at the height of the Loka mountains. And this is the region between Bhumandal and Swarga. So Swarga is within this small region only. Higher than that is Mahar, Janar, Tapa, Satya, which we have not discussed yet. Okay, but just to give you some idea, this region is just this very small region, which is the Swarga. So everything that we discussed is in this part. That same part is here expanded. These Loka mountains are these side mountains which conceal this area. This is the Bhumandal. This is the sun's orbit, the moon, the constellations, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Saptarishis, and Dhruvaloka. The height of Dhruvaloka is of the height of Lokalok mountains. This part between the moon to Dhruvaloka, this whole area is known as Swarga. The area below the moon and down, leading almost up to the Bhumandal, is known as Bhuvarloka. Suryaloka, or the sun's orbit, is at the middle of Bhuvarloka. And of course, this disk itself is Bhu. There is Bhu, there is Bhuva, and there is Swaha. So this whole space is Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha. Okay, so stop share. So I'm sure this was a challenging session for many of you. I'm opening up the floor if there are any questions.
Yeah, very good, Prabhu.
Yes.
Not sure whether it's a right question, maybe what I'm trying to ask and what I'm trying to put across.
Mm.
So the Kala Chakra, right? We have signs, right? And the planets, right? The planet orbit aligns with that when you're telling that this planet is on this Rashi, right? You have this planet on this position, all those things, right? Is there a alignment of these orbits or alignment?
Yes.
Okay.
Alignment in the sense, like what you said now, the constellations and the nakshatras are fixed to the Kala Chakra, and the Kala Chakra is rotating at a particular speed, which is slightly faster than the rotation of the sun. The sun takes 1 day complete one rotation, right? 24 hours. But Kala Chakra takes slightly longer than that. Sorry, not longer, it is faster, so slightly shorter than that in terms of time. And that is why the sun moves relative to the Kala Chakra, the opposite direction. It seems to be moving in a anti-clockwise direction vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra. Now, in the backdrop of the Kala Chakra moving in the middle of the Bhu-Bhuva Swaha region, all the other grahas and luminaries are rotating around the same axis. Isn't it? The same axis, the axis between Sumeru and Dhruva. All other planets are revolving. So as they are revolving, because the Kala Chakra has the various constellations, if you take a top view of the universe, if you look at the universe from the top, you will see that at any point, every luminary vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra is passing over a particular constellation and over a particular nakshatra. You understand?
Yeah.
Because they are having their own motion, which is slightly at a different speed from the Kala Chakra. Each one has its own orbit. The moon's orbit is so much faster than the sun. The sun's speed is almost that of the Kala Chakra. But the other planets, each of the planet we discussed, right? Some are moving at faster speed, some are moving at... The sun through one constellation moves in 1 month. Jupiter moves through one constellation in 1 year. Shani moves through one constellation in 2.5 years. Each of these planets has its own orbit, own speed, and based on its orbit and speed and its relative motion vis-a-vis the Kala Chakra, each of them passes through the influence of a particular constellation at any given time and a nakshatra at any given time. So that's the understanding.
So Prabhuji, so one question comes to mind, right? Now this is technical aspects. Now how our spiritual practice will affect those chakras? I mean,
which chakra?
No, I mean not our timings, right? Our effects of planets, right?
The planets will affect our body and mind. But planets cannot affect our soul and devotion. So it cannot affect our time. Kala Chakra cannot destroy devotion, devotional service. So the point is, when we Kala Chakra and the planets will give its own karma and karmic effects to us as per our past karma. But when we become spiritually advanced and when we deal with karma and react to our various karmic situations in a positive spiritual manner, then automatically the karma and the karmic reactions become minimized. And ultimately, because Krishna is the governing deity of karma, Maya Dakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharachara. In certain cases, Krishna may eliminate certain karmas so that the devotee may not even have to suffer. So our expectation is not that we will become fully free from karma, but our expectation is that we should become free from suffering. You understand the difference? There's a very wonderful saying that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
I didn't get it. Context.
Pain is inevitable. So let's say based on karma, Shani is in full force, Sadesati. Suraj Sadesati is going on. Because I hope nothing like this happens, but let's say suddenly something happens and a very disturbing situation comes in your life. I don't want to say more because
No, that's okay, Prabhu.
no, it's not okay.
You are my guru, so it doesn't affect.
No, if I say and if it happens, then what?
Doesn't
I don't
affect.
want to say.
I have
No,
that
no,
confidence.
No, don't have wrong confidence. I have said about my own life certain things, by saying things have happened. So I don't want to say anything inauspicious. So let's say something inauspicious happens because of the force of our karma. The situation will come into our life and cause inconvenience and may cause us pain, maybe at a physical level, and create so many situations. But whether in that situation you suffer or you don't suffer, that depends on you. You understand?
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah? For a person who's advanced in spiritual consciousness, even though external there may be tribulation and turbulence, in their consciousness they remain unaffected. So that is the state that we want to work towards. Yes, to some extent, karmas, reactions, and all this will also be mitigated. That is true. But at the end of the day, you cannot remain totally, because we are in Dukkhalayam, no? External situations are going to be troublesome. They will create challenges. They may create pain, physical or mental. But the solution for us is to become transcendental by choosing to not suffer. How do we choose to not suffer? Choose to not suffer by being fixed in the understanding that I am not neither this body nor the mind. I am the eternal soul. It's beyond and transcendental. I am a part and parcel of the Lord. And all these reactions which are coming, tatte nukampam susumikshamano bhunjanamivatmakritam vipakam. My own past is coming back on me. Let me learn from it and gratefully accept that and grow through it. Not just go through it. Grow through it spiritually, so that I become more fixed in my devotional service. And through that whole process, always with gratitude and faith, taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such a person attains liberation, the Bhagavatam says. So that is what I meant. Pain is inevitable. You cannot stop the force of nature. Some people think, I will become so good. That's the demoniac mentality. Demoniac mentality, what it thinks, I will control nature and stop the force of nature so that everything is pleasant for me. This is nonsense. You cannot do that. You are not the controller of Maya.
Yeah.
All the people who tried like that, Ravana tried, Hiranyakashipu tried, and they were so powerful that they were successful to some extent. And we are hopeless cases, so we will not be able to control anywhere near what they were able to. But that is not the way to deal with. That is not the formula. The formula is to transcend in our consciousness, to not become affected by the dualities. That's why Krishna is telling Arjuna again and again, the Bhagavad Gita. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labha jaya jaya. Sukha and dukkha, look at it equally. Labh, hani, jay, parajay, equally, and fight. Don't bother, just fight. That way you will not be affected by any. So that is why pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Okay.
Yeah, it's clear, Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Amit Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Amit, you want to ask?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, in your presentation where you showed us the Kala Chakra chart, the dates that were mentioned below the zodiac signs were slightly different from the dates that we know of the zodiac signs. So why is that so?
I don't know. Actually, I did not research much into the dates. That may be just one possible snapshot, because obviously, the English calendar is not always, is obviously not exactly aligned with the Vedic calendar. The Vedic calendar is, I think every 3 odd years, again, the Vedic and the Indian calendar get aligned. Yeah. But interestingly, for example, interestingly, Makar Sankranti is on 14 January. Almost always. What is Makar Sankranti? Makar Sankranti means sun is transiting into Aries, which means the sun has completed one round. It is going from, it should be going from 2 to 1, right? So it should be transiting out from Aries, from Rishabh to Aries, and must be transiting out from there. Anyway, I'm not an expert, but the point is that the important point is each of this cycle is 1 month and the sun takes 12 months to transit through. Now, because it is 28 days rather than an exact month, then those numbers, move around a bit. But the way the calculations work is eventually the solar and the lunar calendar realign themselves every few years. Now, I don't have all the calculations handy with me, but there's a beautiful book on astronomy also written by Pavaneshwar Prabhu. Those who are more interested in this topic to understand in more detail can refer to it. But yes, you are right. I mean, it is not that this date is always exactly the date, but he may have picked it up based on assuming 14 January as the transit for, if we look at it, where is Aries? Sorry, Makar. Oh, Mesha is Aries. Sorry. My Makar is Capricorn. Yeah, 15 January to 12th. Yeah, so exactly, Makar Sankranti. Sorry, my bad. Makar is not Aries. Makar is Capricorn. So 15 January. So that is the assumption. The assumption is when exactly, the Makar Sankranti happens on 14th and 15th onwards, the sun is in Makar Rashi. That is the assumption.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Got it. So the starting point is different. That is why the dates are different.
Yeah. So it is a 14-day thing, a 28-day thing. Maybe you can look at that diagram later again and see whether it is calculated 28 days, 28 days, 28 days like that. But because it exactly doesn't add up, and that's why this whole idea of Adhik Mas comes into picture, because there are some extra days. So if you look at that diagram, later I'll post it, there is a small section which is extra days every year. And those extra days add up, and then they finally form the Adhik Mas. So that is the concept.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
So I have not gone too deep into this, but I just broadly understand the concept, but I haven't worked out all the calculations myself. Pavaneshwar Prabhu and others are very thorough with this. So if you go through his videos, and that's another thing I'm going to do, those who are more interested in these calculations and the, and this thing, I'll be posting a couple of videos. Those who are more interested to go a bit more depth, because, I do not have that proficiency in the topic, like what Pavaneshwar Prabhu has, obviously. He's the author of the books and I've learned from him. So, he has he's very, very thorough. So those who are interested can go into those videos and get better understanding. Yeah. Any other question, Amit?
No, Prabhuji, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, Sudhir Sundar Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhu. Prabhu, just to confirm something, Prabhu, the planet Pluto, is it in our Vedic science? Is it supposed to be
No.
Pitra Loka? Is it, Prabhu? No.
I don't know whether it's.
Because
it is not even there in our list of planets. It's not even a graha for us.
Okay. I was
So,
just wondering.
exactly what I do not know. I mean, Pavaneshwar may have some explanation for it. I haven't, maybe it's in the astronomy book. I haven't discussed this point with him. But no, it's not a graha, nor is Uranus a graha. So obviously there are so many stars and other celestial objects which are also, in space, which are rotating. So it is not that nothing else other than this is rotating. So there are so many other, like we saw in that diagram, right? Around Dhruva are so many objects, so many small stars are also taras. There are like tens and thousands of taras in the skies, right? So there are so many other this thing. So there may be various other kinds of things, but for us and for those we call as we meaning the Vedas call as grahas. The grahas are 9 navagrahas. Modern astrology also includes Uranus and Pluto in the charts and tries to derive some astrological calculations. But in traditional Vedic astrology, these are not factored in. We don't consider them as graha. So that's all I know. I'm not an expert in the topic.
Okay, Prabhu, thanks.
Like what I said, no, what we define as planet and what is the concept of graha are slightly different concepts. So it may be a planet in the technical sense that modern physicists or astronomists call it a planet, but it is not a graha from the Vedic definition. Perhaps it is something like that. In the sense that it doesn't have any direct influence on human life, possibly. Okay, anything else? So thank you very much. Thank you for tolerating. So the next topic is an extension of this topic of the Kala Chakra, which is known as the Shishumara planetary system. So it's also not a very long chapter, it's a small one. So we will discuss that also. And then we'll go into the topic of the subterranean, and then we'll discuss a little bit about the higher planets and what is there in the higher planets. Even though it's not directly covered here, I will, since it will be of interest to you all, I have gathered some information. So I will share something. What is there in Janarlok? What is there in Maharlok? What is from authentic sources? And I will share a bit with you. And then we'll go into the subterranean planets and then the hellish planets. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Shambhavita Gaurav.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank
Prabhuji.
you,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna, Purushottam Masa ki Jai,
Jai.
Parama Ekadashi ki Jai,
Jai.
Bhagavatam.
Jai.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.